Go.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcoming to Editing People Who Hate to Be Edited. I'm Marcia Shannon. I came across this idea in a brainstorming session where we were trying to come up with webinar ideas. And I said, well, how about editing people who hate to be edited? And everybody said, good, you do that. This goes back to, and why this was on my mind is that it goes back to an incident in my earlier days that has kind of haunted me for a while. But first of all, who am I? I'm currently an STC senior member. I'm a volunteer with the Technical Editing SIG and of course with the Instructional Design and Learning SIG. Getting involved with some of the Carolina chapter activities throughout the year as well. My background, to be completely transparent, I started as file clerk in a business where I got to learn how to do keyboarding at a time when there were no PCs. But I learned how to ask questions and be open to learning new machines, new concepts, new processes. When we did automate, I was able to be on the ground floor for that and got to see a lot of how computers came to rule the world. All of that gave me an in to becoming a technical writer. I did that for decades before I knew I could call myself a technical writer, but that's okay. What happened and why this topic is on my mind is really simple. I was working as full-time technical writer. We were mostly revising documentation, putting them through annual reviews, testing them against current processes. And usually a subject matter expert would do all the heavy lifting as far as testing and revising. Then it would come to me for final review, conformity to the style sheet, standard spelling and grammar checking. Well, with one particular document, with one particular SME, I changed a word in the document, returned it to the writer. She took exception to my change. It was one of those, nobody has to change my words because everything I've done is correct kind of thing. I learned that a long time after the incident. When she sent it back to me, she put the word in red. And that's when I got stupid. So I put back the original word, took out the red, because that's all she did was just send me the document with the red. This is a very personality-driven situation, obviously. We went through back and forth, not being grown up about any of it. But what I realized was that I wasn't going to win when I got called into my manager's office and told, those people know what they're doing. They don't need you to wordsmith. Tail between my legs. Went back and said, okay, the only person I can change is me. And how am I going to do that? And I had to start thinking through, it isn't what I want, it's what they want. The writers are the people who have to be on board with being edited. They have to trust the editor. They have to be able to talk to the editor. And I'm the only one who can make that happen. Now, we're having a little bit of a slide problem here. There we go. Which brings me to writer resistance, which is really where an editor stops worrying about what's on the page and has to look at the people side of editing, because resistance is a people problem. It comes back to the whole idea of perception and whether someone feels you are criticizing them instead of showing them a better way to do something. It can be very insulting to someone who has maybe worked very hard on something and they feel that their effort is being discounted or ignored, or they've been told they're wrong. And people hate to be told they're wrong. If anybody needs an example of that, just turn on TV any day of the week and watch reality TV. So the thing is there's no fun in feuding with people. And what a technical editor has to do is understand is that the first job is to support the audience, because they're the ones who have to use the document to succeed in their job, to enjoy using a product. A lot of times a writer may not be as aware, which is funny because they should be looking at their personas, they should be thinking of their audience, but everyone can get into a rut. So when an editor has to bring a writer back into awareness of the audience, the whole point of that exercise is to make sure you do it as kindly and as clearly and as easily as possible. Okay, let me get going here. So the causes for resistance. Why do people resist being edited? Why do they feel that they don't need that advice? Resistance is an emotional response. It rises from fear or anger. A writer may fear that that edit points out their mistakes. Having your mistakes pointed out, documented in an edited document, may be something that's going to make them feel less than competent. It may make them be angry that they're not being taken seriously, that their work is being held up for ridicule. They may be feeling that editing their words challenges their expertise because they are, after all, the source person for the content. All of those emotions can lead them to feel disrespected, again, to lose confidence in their own ability. And the other fear that isn't very often spoken is that, are you sharing this with my boss? Are other people seeing my mistakes? All of this causes a lot of emotion that can definitely cloud judgment, can drive resistance. You don't want to prompt those actions, those emotions when you're the editor, but we all know you don't control what other people think. You can only control your actions. So what we're called on to do when we're editing is to hone our techniques so that we always leave an opening for a writer to respond to the edits, to question them, to work through their fear and anger by talking to us. And a lot of times a writer's going to have a writer may not even notice that they're feeling an emotional reaction. They may just feel, this is my turf, this is my territory, I've got to defend it. So we have to be constantly prepared to diffuse a situation that the other side doesn't even know they've engaged in. So an editor has to be as clear as possible. Be ready to explain the reason for the edit. If you're doing a substantive edit and meaning seems to be changing, be prepared to sit down and talk it through, ask more questions.
The audio cut out.
Nothing goes as planned. Marcia, we can't hear you.
I've got no audio, except I heard you just say that we can't hear Marcia.
Yeah, we've lost Marcia.
Is this, I'm sorry. Is this slide a good place to start?
Go for it.
Yes, okay, yes. I really didn't know what I was doing when I started this today. Okay, what causes resistance to editing? Okay. Resistance is an emotional response. rising from fear or anger. Now, a wise person once told me that anger drives fear, and I believe it. But a writer may fear that the edits are pointing out their mistakes, that making mistakes means they're not good writers, that what seems to be their incompetence will be noticed by management, that they might be fired. It's real logical progression from what did you change to, oh my gosh, my world is ending. A writer could become angry because they feel challenged by the edits. They feel that their competence is being challenged, that their expertise is being questioned. But both emotions will lead to resistance to editing, to rejecting edits, to refusing to discuss things. And that's where the editor has to step up, step in, and start taking control of the situation. You don't want to get this you don't want to get to this situation, but it can happen very fast, very easily. Because you can't control how a writer is going to react. You can only react to their reaction. So that you need to work on your techniques. You need to hone the techniques you'll need to do an edit that is an open-ended edit wherever we've gone beyond the simple spelling and grammar changes, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about possibly substantive changes where you feel, where you've edited because the flow of the information was rocky, where a word was used incorrectly and it seems to change the meaning of the entire paragraph. But that means you're going to have to be able to, in effect, defend your edits without falling into that same fear and anger loop that your writer has already ventured into. So that brings us to approaches. How do an editor and a writer get past all this fear and this anger and this upsetment? Most of my experience has been with subject matter experts. They usually recognize that as an editor, I have writing skills while they have the subject matter down pat, and that we are collaborating to produce this document. I make it a point to assure them that their writing is the least important part of the process, in that they are not expected to conform to a style guide. They are not expected to worry about all the spelling and grammar. If they would, that's lovely, but nobody's going to ding them about it. In effect, this is where that dreaded phrase, make it pretty, comes into play, because sometimes that is a reassurance to the writer that you respect what they've done and you value what they've done, and you're just going to make it pretty. It's a good diffusing phrase. All of this means that when you're collaborating, you're part of the team. And being part of the team means you've got an in, you can ask questions, you're expanding your knowledge, you're sharing what you know, all of which contributes to a much happier workspace. It keeps you from being a judge. It lets you be seen as a co-worker, not an expert, not as somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. This is how I came to this whole situation and this whole topic. Because the most confusing thing I ever encountered in my public speaking course way back when was the simple phrase, a simple sentence, message received is message sent. For some reason, I kept changing that little IS word into an equal sign. And to me, it seemed perfectly clear that I send you a message, that's the message you receive. And it had to have it pounded into my head that whatever you say has no guarantee to being received the same way you intended it. And intent never comes through the message. That's why we spend time making sure we are faces and voices as well as markup to our writers. They know we are people, they can talk to us. So that's when I figured out, okay, communicate. How do I communicate? How do I make things better? How do I keep on everybody's good side? And it comes down to talking to people. Talk to them at the lunch table. Talk to them during break. Be one of the people who brings in something for the potluck once a month. All of those things keep you in the loop, make you let you be seen as part of the team. And that's how you're going to get along with folks more than anything else. The other thing to think about when dealing with writers who don't want something changed is think about, how much do I want to pay to be right? Is this a stylistic matter where you would rather see it in a certain way, but the sense of what's being conveyed works just as well in the original way written? Sometimes it's not a bad idea, and it is not unreasonable to simply accept what the writer feels is the best possible way to say something. It also is another little bridge building step, because they know you're not out to get them and you are a person of reason. That can always come into play later down the road. Let's talk about these three ideas of collaborate and communicate and compromise. Collaboration has to start early. It has to start from the day you walk in the door in the role of a technical writer, technical editor. It means you've built your toolkit of information, of approaches. It means you're going to share all of those tools. You're going to explain style guides, not with the idea of you all will do it this way, but with the idea of I may change things because this is what we have to produce so that the company has a standardized product in our writing. It's always that two-way street of you give me the heart of the thing and I'll make it pretty. Making it pretty can be a long, hard haul, but we don't have to tell everybody that. You can coach people instead of criticize them. And again, when you've defined your standards, when you've shown folks, okay, these are the words that maybe legal department has said we must use, or you may have to look at your governing body. I've usually worked in regulated industries from banking to healthcare. And there are lots and lots and lots of rules about all that. And there are definitely certain words and phrases that must always be used to convey certain information. Sometimes writers, especially people who don't write for a living but enjoy writing, can get a little too creative and stray from what the standards are for the kind of document that you're producing. If you've got someone who's interested in how does the style guide work, why are these the industry standard rules? Offer to do a bit of training, do off-the-cuff training. Don't make big, elaborate training sessions, but just stop and explain something so that, again, you've got a constant dialogue going and you're building trust with all your writers. Another thing to do is to explain your editing process. Explain that you will assume with seasoned writers that an occasional spelling error is just a typo, and you're not going to send them something marked up because they had a bad day at the keyboard. Show them that what you're interested in is making their work shine, and you'll probably get a lot better dialogue going. Put comment boxes in. Look at how you phrase things. Sometimes I found that I was being way too short in my little comments, and it sounded rather brusque, and it wasn't always understandable. And never just put a question mark unless that's already an established process in the particular place where you are, because it just doesn't lead anyone to answer a question. It just makes them wonder what you're wondering about, and you still are going to have to go through the effort of getting together, explaining what your question is, listening to their answer, and deciding how you're going to edit that particular piece in the document. The other thing to do is to set your expectations for everyone by having schedules, by having regular touch points, whether they're emails or phone calls or occasional meetings. Don't meeting people to death because they're just going to get resistant with that. And of course, we all know right now, all of that's a little more difficult than we thought it would be, but we'll get through that. It's always fine to just do a quick, how you doing, with someone you know is on a big project and they may be drowning. They may not have even looked at the last 2 sets of edits that you sent them. Let them know it's okay to say, hey, I need help. Even if you can't be the one to help them, you may be able to help them figure out what to do with it. That's collaboration. Communication. We all know about communication in so many ways. Be careful with email. Email can be a little time bomb. Be careful who's copied on various pieces of information. If you're sending someone the first edited version of the document, don't send it to the world because, of course, you've made changes to what they've done. If you're sharing that with everyone, but there's only a two-way street at this point, you're making that person feel exposed. Another bad idea. Whatever tool you're using, and unfortunately, I'm only familiar with Office, but whatever tool you're using, use every piece of the editing process, of the review process, such as comments or sticky notes inside an Adobe Acrobat file. You can actually give people a small written explanation of why you're changing something. Sometimes what you want to edit should be suggested, not required. And something I've always had to do when I've had pushback on why do I have to put this in there? Why do I have to do this a certain way? Is to cite your legal requirements, cite audit requirements. I've always had to write to audit because that was always the proof that was handed to the auditors from the regulatory agencies, from the internal, from our customers. But the documents were more or less the final proof of this is how we do what we say we are doing. So it's got to be right, it's got to be clear, it's got to be consistent. And those are things you have to convey to your writers. If you feel something needs a major rewrite, don't send that, talk first. Marshal your reasons why you think that maybe something could do with a more substantive editing. And then sit down with the writer and work through it. Make yourself available to people. Tell them they can call you, they can drop by your cubicle, you can take a walk down the hall and discuss something, but let them know that you're not just sitting there waiting for them. You're willing to work with them however they need to be worked with. And my favorite thing to avoid is email war. Any squabble, difference of opinion that goes to a third round of email needs to be stopped. You all need to get face-to-face, talk it through, talk it out, look at what's causing this constant back and forth. It's just going to make life easier for everybody. So we've talked about collaboration. We've talked about communication. What we need to talk about now is conflict resolution, as in we're either going to figure this out. Good. If I hit the right button, you'll see what we're doing. One at a time, please. Okay. Open discussion. Been leading up to this all through this talk. Talk to people, talk to them often, talk to them about everything, and let them know that you're willing to listen. You've got to handle feedback when it occurs. You can't let it fester, which means you immediately recognize it, acknowledge that the writer has something to add to the discussion, listen, and speak directly to your writers. When you've gotten to the point of open conflict, you're past doing things via email. It's time to really get face to face or voice to voice and talk it through. And question your own ideas and your own motives as the editor. Is this simply the style you prefer to have done? We had a year-long problem at one of the places where I worked when one particular auditor from one particular company decided that all of our documents had to be restyled, and restyled in a very major way, involving hundreds and hundreds of hours. We were able to talk that down to just the 40 documents that that particular auditor had to look at, which left the other 200 not needing a rewrite. But it had to be talked through, and it had to be talked through in several different meetings. Every time somebody would send an email, we'd have to have another meeting because there were so many opinions about it that we had to come through it and do it that way. When you're in a conflict resolution meeting, one of the things you have to do always is come back to that. Who is the audience and how are we going to reach them? And then take yourself back to respecting what the writer has to offer and what the writer is saying. It's always possible the editor is wrong. We never can discount that idea. But look at the causes of the conflict. Is this something that we just have to get past and decide, okay, this is how we'll do it this time? The one thing that always can bog the whole process down and leave everybody feeling bruised and annoyed is running to management. You don't need a manager to solve things at this point because you are the editor. If you can explain what needs to change in a way that your writer can understand it, you will reach conflict resolution. If you've got someone who is in a position to cause you more pain than success, you have to look at compromising. And that's true of any business situation, but it's particularly true in these situations. Just make sure that everything you're talking about all the time that you're doing this keeps the final goal in mind, which is to deliver a useful document on time. Once people can agree on that, you're going to get a lot less heat in the discussion. And just for fun, I put this in because I found this on a t-shirt and it's totally useless, but it did tickle my funny bone and I hope maybe it did for you too. It's one of those things where it reminds me that, yes, I have certain things that I dislike in modern English as it's fluidly moving these days, but nobody appointed me language cop, so I just have to sit back and let them happen. Keeping in mind that it's very easy for everyone to get distracted and confused and discouraged. And our job as editors is not to do that. Our job is to coach so that they reach their full potential, their full success as writers. Our job is to show them the respect that we have for them, for their knowledge, for their ability, and work our way through all three possible approaches of collaboration and communication and compromising. And always keep the writer clear that you are focused on the writer's success by producing that usable document. I thank you for listening to me, and we will take questions. Take everyone off mute, I guess, because I did not see a chat. We don't have a chat box, do we?
Yes, we do. And I've been chatting.
We do.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I haven't seen.
But we don't have any questions yet.
I can't see it. Okay, there.
Like a balloon.
There we go. Okay. I went too far. Just wanted to let you know if you have any questions or comments, I can be reached at this email address, I'm also on LinkedIn and under Marcia Shannon. Always interested in a dialogue, although the guy who asked me if I was single has been disconnected from my network now. That threw me.
Yeah, they're out there.
I had never had anyone on LinkedIn ask my marital status before. Okay. So now I found the chat.
Yep.
Okay.
So I like the way that you've kind of packaged this as, you know, I had this thing happen to me and I decided I needed to learn to get better, and here's what I learned. I really like that.
You know where that came from?
Where?
You.
Me?
Your power of story. Yes, ma'am.
How about that?
I pay attention.
Yeah,
It did. It I found everything, as soon as I stop talking in a personal mode, I get real stodgy. It's one of the reasons I don't write fiction, because I write the worst possible fiction in the world. I like straightforward declarative sentences. And I can talk a good story, but I can't write it worth a darn.
So we'll be recording your
So-
story from now on. We'll just let you talk.
Okay.
Well, if there are no further questions, we can let you guys have the rest of your hour back. I know everybody's busy. I want to say a special thank you to the people who attended in person today. We really enjoyed having someone for Marcia to talk to and interact with. And I
Yes.
also want to thank the people that are listening to this on our YouTube channel. We appreciate every view. We hope we love to have some feedback from you. If there are presentations you would like to see us try to find a speaker for, we're looking for ideas. And we say a great big thank you to Marcia for this, what is very useful to me, this great information. I had seen it at the summit and I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to get it out to a wider audience. So here we are.
Appreciate it.
Is there a
Okay.
link for a link to send the content ideas or proposals to, or is that in one of the emails that we already got in connection with this presentation?
So Marcia's email is right there on the screen.
Okay, that's one. That one.
Yep. That's
And
not,
I will make sure it gets. Go ahead.
it's not clickable in the it's not clickable there in the Zoom, but
I'll copy it off before it goes away.
I'll put it in chat.
Oh, good.
All right, I'm stopping the recording.